Project Sapient is a podcast meant to engage our brothers and sisters in the law enforcement and military communities in conversations that we all know we need to have. All opinions you'll hear are our own, are protected by our First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and in no way reflect or are meant to reflect the opinion of any specific agency, officer, or service member. Some opinions may be controversial. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy.
Project Sapient, guys. Ayman is here with Pete.
Hello.
We just want to say thank you. We're up in over the 20,000 mark on our listenership. We absolutely love you for helping us out and listening to a bunch of rejects, huh?
Yeah. It's just amazing we can string sentences together.
I know. I want to say thanks to our supporters. DCD Automotive, which is the Boch Group, Till Valhalla Project, AAA Police Supply, Havok Journal, our partners at the Profiles and Havok Podcast, Second Mission, Live Boston, OD Kit, Eagle Eye Firearms, GunTrack, Fit Cops, 22 Mohawks, and Joint Operations. Check us out at projectsapient.org and send us an email, projectsapient2020@gmail.com. Again, thank you guys. We really love you. Thank you so much. So, what are we doing, buddy?
Hey, buddy. So, this episode is going to be actually a combined episode with our friends, with our friend Chris. Christopher Paul Meyer from the Profiles and Havok. So he went through a little rebranding, kind of, changed the name a little bit, but still the same conversation about, the writers and spotlights and Havok and different topics in the military and in the social world, political world. You know how Chris is. He just kind of goes all over the place.
Dude, well, every one of his episodes is awesome.
Yeah. So one of the episodes I did with him was about, we did like a panel type discussion, and one of his guests, I think I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but last name his actually I believe he is still active duty. The one who I'm talking about, and his name is. McGurk, I think his last name. The guest at the time.
Butchering people's names.
I know I'm butchering the names. I'm sorry. His name is Marshall McGurk. That's what it is. Marshall McGurk. So he actually kind of put a plug out for a book that a fellow soldier wrote. Soldier's name is Terron Wharton. He was in Iraq. And he wrote a book called High Risk Soldier. Very interesting.
Yeah, I was skimming through it. I kind of wish I had read it before, but
yeah, it's a very, very interesting, great book about his time in Iraq and being essentially labeled as a high risk soldier by the military for seeing combat. It's different. It's something that the Army and military probably started using this term, high risk soldier. So he wrote about it. So it's called High Risk Soldier, Trauma and Triumph in the Global War on Terror.
GWAT.
So with this episode, myself and Chris kind of teamed up to bring him on and talk about High Risk Soldier. And what it was like for him going through it and writing about the book. And, our conversation is probably going to go everywhere. So it's going to be a combined episode between us or Project Sapient and Profiles of Havok. So when it's going to be a kind of combined episode. You know what I mean?
So I'm going to be stepping out of the episode because of a timing thing. Yeah. So we'll just get it rolling now. All right.
All right, cool.
Ayman, good to see you, brother. Terron.
Hey. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you. Welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the shows.
The shows. Come on. Where's your DC Marvel?
Our DC Marvel crossover episode. That's right. Yeah. Worlds are colliding.
Yeah, exactly.
So Terron, this is. I'll start with just one compliment, and then I know Ayman has a whole bunch of things that he wants to dive into. But let me just say, I've read an awful lot of first-person military accounts. I don't think this is recency bias, but that may have been the best I've ever read. That was.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a phenomenal read, and I'm saying that not just to compliment you, but so that everyone listening knows this is a book that is incredibly worth your time. I don't like reading war stories too much anymore, so it's always a little bit of a willpower thing to force myself to read it. But holy shit, was that worth it? That was an incredible read. So I just wanted to compliment you with that and set the level of expectations for people as they listen to this, that regardless of what we talk about or how good this interview is, this book is phenomenal and is worth checking out, and everyone should know that going in. So thank you for writing that. And I've got a lot of questions for you coming up about it, but I'll let Ayman ask his piece.
Yeah, so on the same note, Terron, same thing with me. When I read it, I'm like Chris. I don't really read too many war books or watch these days war movies. I tend to stay away from any of them. But after the book was actually by Marshall in a previous episode, told us about the book, and I definitely wanted to read it and look at it, and just reading it. I mean, it was amazing. You feel it too when reading it. Like you can tell the emotion in it as a fellow combat vet, and Chris can probably attest to it, that I felt it right as I was reading it. I can almost sense the pain in the certain chapters and parts of the book, just by reading the words, just by knowing, being, especially for someone like us being over there. And then on the civilian side, I would imagine civilians will also see that and know that emotion, or understand, or have some, not so much understand, but have a certain appreciation for it, knowing this is what Terron went to. This is what soldiers overseas in the recent wars went through. So my hats off to, and thank you for actually doing this for us as veterans of the current wars, to really take a look deep into the psyche of that being of a combat soldier, and kind of the fallout. I mean, I told Chris, I've told my story to Chris on how I got kicked out of the military over injuries that I sustained in Iraq. And reading this book, I'm like, my God, because at the time I don't remember them using these terms that they used for you. It was like an automatic decision. Yeah, we'll get him med board him. Let's get him at, like, yeah. Really, like, to me, it felt a little betrayal on my part. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I just spent sorry for swearing, but I just spent 19 months, 20 months of my life, doing this war, fighting this war, doing what I did. And now you're just like, you're damaged goods. We don't want you anymore. So that's kind of my comment to kind of start it off. So I think, yeah, Chris, you're right. Expectations are going to be high for this, because again, it's going to talk about what, I love talking about, the root issues within the military community, within the law enforcement community, PTSD, TBI, all these things that really it gets talked about, but not really. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that just, we know it's there. We'll talk about it, but then we'll just pull it off on the side.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you guys, the reason that I chose to write the book for two reasons. Number one, it was just part of my own personal therapy and my own part of just coming to grips with what happened and overcoming my own PTSD. The more you pull something out and you look at it and you examine it and you work with it, the less traumatic it becomes. It goes from something that's a trauma to something that's a bad memory to something that's just a memory and part of yourself. Second, I wrote it because I'm part of several groups that do not talk about mental health and behavioral health. I'm a soldier. I'm an officer. I'm a combat arms officer. I'm Black, and I'm a Black man, right? So those groups very much really just don't talk about mental health a lot, especially you see it a lot in the Black community growing up. Family members of mine who struggle with mental health, and there was a big hesitancy to really name the problem and name what was going on and just kind of ignore it. So I figure by, hey, speaking out of my personal experiences and speaking to those groups is, hey, being able to, one, kind of normalize it and remove the stigma and just kind of show people, hey, you're not alone, right? I'm the poster child for the stereotype of people who shouldn't have these issues, right? But hey, I have them too, and if you have them, you can overcome it. I liken it to having a broken leg. If you break your leg, you go get surgery, you go through physical therapy, and when your leg's healed and the cast comes off, you don't walk around like your leg's broken anymore. It's the same way for mental health and moral injuries, right? Is you name the problem, you face the problem, you do the work, and then you heal and you move on.
Yeah, I want to, Terron, let me just set the table a little bit for this. I think, to me, one of the strengths of the book, there are three that I can see right off the bat. One is that there's no two ways about it. For those that haven't been overseas or haven't been in the military, the way you describe a deployment, the quiet parts and the loud parts, I think is, I haven't analyzed the writing style enough to know why, but for some reason it resonated in a way I was like, man, anybody would feel like they've been there after reading this. Your ear for dialogue, I think, was phenomenal. When you talk about just the radio calls going out, it was such a flashback. And I think anyone can relate to that. So that's one thing, is the verisimilitude. The second piece, I think, is how you describe, just your ability to describe that and describe moments that I think any service member can relate to, and family members or people just are curious that don't understand veterans would want to know, but describing very nuanced gray area mental states, really explaining, like when you first talked about going to Disney World on leave, just describing exactly what it was in ways that everybody, I know for me, and I'll assume for Ayman as well, could relate to, but you really described it well in a way I was like, I don't think I can put that down on paper. He just said it. That's it. That's it. You nailed it. Like there's nothing else to say. And then of course the third piece is the inherently therapeutic part, I think, and your journey and talking about, that evolution and what you found and all how that unfolded. So I think for those three things, it made this book just phenomenal. I really did think, and for those that aren't aware, this was all your journals and your emails that this was culled from. So yep. My first question to you is, how the fuck were you able to write this articulately while you were over there?
So writing's always kind of been a passion and a hobby of mine. And I will tell you that what you see now is the product of a lot of thought, reflection, and editing. Okay. So when I went back and started pulling everything together, there were some parts that rang clearly and some parts were an incoherent mess.
Gotcha.
Right. So part of the editing process was editing for clarity, right? Cleaning up sentence structure, cleaning up grammar. I had a couple of wonderful high school friends who helped me. One is actually a psychiatrist who works with vets. The other is a librarian, and the third is a English professor in our hometown. They did a lot to help me achieve those things that you were talking about, and really kind of help with a lot of just the technical aspects of the writing. But yeah, this was, I mean, if I sent you the original document with the original emails and things like that, it'll read 95% the exact same. And it was just writing has always just been kind of a little bit of a therapy for me. I've always enjoyed it. I've always done it. And journaling, it's weird because my time in Iraq was probably the most consistently that I had journaled and written in my life.
And you didn't find that being that introspective while you're still there was a detriment. You found that to be a benefit to you.
You know what? I don't know if I could say that it was a benefit or a detriment. It was just a release valve for me.
Hmm.
Writing down my own thoughts in the journal entries, writing the emails to family and friends. It was a release for me, and it was a way to stay in contact. I know it seems a little weird now, but you guys remember early on in the war, there was a line for the NWR, there was the line for the call center.
Yep.
I had like the entire 28-digit string memorized for my MCI calling card.
Yeah, I
right?
remember those.
From like the access code
Yeah.
to the DSN number, so you could get like the discount minutes, all the way to my girlfriend at the time's phone number. It was either that or you had the really shitty Iraq cell phones.
I had one of those.
Yep. You stand on one leg with your left arm sticking out,
Yep.
hold your rifle in the other, and pin the phone to your elbow. You might get a bar.
Oh, that just brought back memories on that.
Yeah, so it was a way to stay in touch and communicate with people because it wasn't as easy back then.
Yeah.
And the occasional email to a lot of friends and family answered a lot of questions. It assured people that I was physically okay, because a lot of my closer friends and family near the end realized that I was not mentally okay. But that's really what it really was. It's part hobby, part self-reflection, and just part pressure release valve is why I did it.
I'm just amazed you had the composure to do that while you were there. Sorry, Ayman, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, just interesting point about you saying culturally as a Black man and how in that culture it's mental health is sort of put aside and never really talked about because it just isn't. It's the same way in my culture. It's not allowed to be talked about, because one, I come from the Middle East. I was born in Africa. My great grandparents and actually members of my family are African. And so we have this whole mix of cultures all together, and none of them talk about mental health because it's not allowed almost. It's like,
right.
Like my son, he has autism. But that side of my family, oh, hell no, that's not art. He's not. He's just being a kid. He's not this. He's not. I'm like, you guys just don't, you don't get it. Like, you don't see it. Same with, when I came home with PTSD and everything. I remember one day my dad had to sit with me and he was like, why are you so angry? I'm like, I just got home. Like, like y'all are driving me out of my mind, like I remember sitting there, he finally asked me, like, it's so funny because again, there was holes all over my walls and I was just, one angry dude after combat. And at the time, I came home, we lost a couple soldiers just before we came home and all that was going on in my head. And then, like with our families, well, life went on and we got the day-to-day stuff we got to do yet, in our cultures, it doesn't matter. Hey, you're back. All right, cool. So we got to start mowing the lawn and we got to go start working and you got to do this and you got to do that. And it's like, because like I'm the oldest in my family, so a lot of responsibility falls on me. So that is going back into the routine of taking my brothers and sisters to soccer practice or to whatever and dropping them off at school and doing this and doing that. And it's like, never getting that moment to actually ask, hey, you all right?
Yeah.
So,
and honestly, it's a lot of those little routine things that I think people don't understand. And the movie American Sniper, when that came out, I think, God, how long ago was that? Are we really that old?
That was a while. Yeah, we're that old. I think it came out a while ago.
But it was two different groups of people saw that movie two different ways. A lot of civilians saw it as a war story. A lot of vets who saw it as the important parts weren't what was happening when he was downrange. It was the stuff that was happening when he got home. Like when he was trying to grocery shop and like couldn't decide between like brands of cereal. I remember having that experience after my first deployment. I went to the Walmart that was by my apartment. And while I was gone, they reorganized it. So I couldn't find anything. It took me 2 hours to get through half my list. And by that point, I was so on edge because of all the people. I was so frustrated because I couldn't just find like fucking Captain Crunch. Like I left the cart in the middle of the Walmart and just left.
Yeah.
And just left. And it's all those little tiny mundane things that you have to kind of retrain yourself to do, because in some ways, combat's easier. You wake up, you prep your gear, you patrol, you try not to die, you come back, you file your debrief, you smoke a whole bunch of cigarettes, drink a whole bunch of chai, play some Xbox, rinse and repeat for 364 days, right? Yeah. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to wear, about my car insurance or my phone bill or picking up groceries or returning a call to the doctor's office, or the thousands of other little minute decisions that aren't so bad when you're even keel. But when you add all those little tiny things against the sheer energy expenditure of just trying to keep yourself together when you first get home, it becomes too much. And then it manifests in the anger and the depression and the drinking and the drugs and all the other little things that become cries for help. But depending on your chain of command, as you know, hey, this isn't a cry for help. He's just another problem child. Hey, just give him minimal stuff. Let's chapter him out as soon as we can. And again, that was, I think, something that a lot of folks don't realize is the people, our brothers and sisters who have succumbed to their PTSD and succumbed to the depression, who have taken their own lives. A lot of times, it's not something big that's the final straw.
Yeah,
it's something little, right?
Yeah.
It's that one more thing that's just too much, and they don't know or have a method or an outlook to talk to somebody before they get to that point.
That's 100%. I mean, I see it on the law enforcement side with my fellow officers who have seen so much trauma. And like you said, though, translate that to doing the mundane things they got to do when they're off duty, pick up groceries, grab this, grab that. And then the pressures of having a family and then coming back to work and then rinse and repeat, literally dealing with societal problems and just over and over and over, and it compounds where you're not getting enough vacation time or you're not getting enough downtime between your shifts because the body takes approximately 48 hours to process whatever trauma you saw. But in 48 hours, we're right back to work. So we haven't had that time to decompress, to deload, to do whatever we need to do to get back up, get back into what's called like a fighting force or mentally healthy and ready to get back into work. So it compounds over and over and over until, like you said, that final valve or that final little thing. It could be the most mundane thing. Oh, I missed a call. Crap. Boom. Like something. It reminds me of I had two quick stories about that. I had a one person where a veteran, Marine Corps veteran, he was in Afghanistan. I was transporting him from I forget which location to a mental hospital, but during the ride, me and him were talking, and I was like, hey, listen, I'm a combat vet myself, so ignore the badge, ignore all this stuff. So let's just talk man to man. And, we talked the whole ride and, shared our stories and everything. And it was extremely therapeutic for the both of us. By the time I got him to the mental hospital, he thanked me so much. And he's like, dude, it was a great conversation. I really needed it to talk about. And the second story was an actual video I saw of a veteran in crisis outside the VA. And this cop, who is himself a Gulf War veteran, pleaded with the kid not to kill himself, and eventually the kid put the gun down and all is good. But it takes us as veterans, because we know what we went through. It takes us to talk to other veterans, not most times. I mean, there's been plenty of times I've gotten phone calls from fellow veterans who are cops who are hurting, or I did the vice versa. And the conversation needs to happen from the chain of command, from whether it's military, law enforcement, firefighting, whatever. The conversation needs to happen in all those. That way we don't get the unfortunate suicides within all the communities. That's the only way this would work. So it's I 100% agree with all that you said, Terron, in your earlier statement.
Yeah, and Terron, can I just ask, to you, what's the difference? What's the tension between repression and discipline? How do you split that difference? Where's the value of each end and the detriment begin?
I think it comes with having an honest conversation with yourself and really, really knowing yourself. Because here's the thing, we like to lie to ourselves all the times, but it's kind of a weird dichotomy, because we lie to ourselves to make ourselves feel better, but we also deep down inside know that we're lying to ourselves, right? If that makes sense. So getting to the point where I call it radical honesty, and that's one thing that really kind of helped me, was there's a whole bunch of things that we just don't want to say out loud ever, about how we feel, about what we're thinking, as husbands and fathers and things like that. I remember at one point, at one of my therapy sessions, I had been talking to my therapist, and I was like, man, I feel like I kind of resent my kids a little bit. And it was like one of those things where, like, God, that's such a horrible thing to say. But you know what? By just saying that and voicing something that had been kind of swirling around, it allowed me to take it out, unpack it, and then fix it and get past it. So I think one is we have to be honest with ourselves. And then two, the discipline part comes in is where you do the work. I know a lot of guys who said, yeah, man, I'm going to go to therapy. They go to therapy once. They're like, all right, I'm good.
That box.
No,
right.
no, you're not, man. I was in therapy last year. After I came out of my previous job, it was very, very high stress. And I was not okay. I wasn't okay mentally, physically, spiritually. So I said, hey, I need to go back to therapy. And therapy really isn't a big deal. I mean, you change the oil in your car, right? You go get a physical once a year, right? It's no different. Yeah. It's no different than a checkup for your mind. And I went, and I went, and I went. And when you put in the work, you will know when you're actually good, if you're truly honest with yourself. So yeah, it's that radical honesty of really being honest with how you feel and what you're thinking and what you need to do. And then it's the discipline to actually take the steps and maintain the consistency to truly address your problem and not just checking that box.
So let me throw this out to you, because it's a question that I always have struggled with, is where does repression end and discipline begin, or vice versa? And right off the bat in your book, you can see a very relatable tension develop with that, because obviously discipline is required for a military lifestyle and certainly on deployment. But with that, yes, because you have to discipline yourselves to the hardships, there is going to be deprivation. You have to be able to inoculate yourself to the stress, to the hate, to the fear, and all the rest of it. Yet, at what point does that pervert into repression in your experience? At what point does that go, hey, look, discipline is good. And I'm saying this for a little bit of an ulterior motive, because I'm giving you a little bit of a devil's advocate argument with the stigma of mental health, and with the stigma of even seeking treatment. I understand why it gets stigmatized, because we are trying to, in the military culture or law enforcement culture, we're trying to prioritize discipline, and that, yeah, you don't need everything to be perfect in order to execute. Yet it's a very nuanced place that we have to be in to go, but at the same time, start to recognize when you're repressing things in a way that's going to be harmful to you down the road, and understand that maybe the time right now isn't to unpack stuff, but understand when you do have a safe place to do it, you need to do it. And that is part of your treatment regimen. But how does that play out for you? How do you split that difference? Where do you see that line?
If I 100% understood that, I would probably have a second book out there. But I remember when I was young cadet at West Point, one of the very first things that gets hammered into you is an officer doesn't fail a mission. Period. Full stop. Like there's no but, or if, or maybe is, you're a United States Army officer and we pay you to accomplish the mission, period. Even when you look at, the warrior ethos in the soldier's creed, what is the very first part? I will always place the mission first. Then it's, I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. But it's, I will always get the job done. And so there's a time when you have to swallow your fear, swallow your pain, swallow your doubts, and you do have to drive through and endure for the sake of getting the mission done at that time. But let's be clear, if you really want to keep yourself from accepting defeat or letting your fellow soldiers down or failing an even larger mission, self-care is part of that, right? Mm-hmm. Ayman, if you had one of your guys go out to the range and he brought out a crate of ammunition and just sat there and fired the whole time until his gun broke. And he's like, but hey, boss, hey, I finally qualified perfect. You know, I nailed that target for you. Would you pat him on the back or would you choke the hell out of him? Right? It's like, hey man, did you stop to clean your weapon? Did you change barrels? Did you do maintenance on your magazines? Like, what are you crazy?
Yeah.
So when you think about it, we do the same thing with our equipment. Hey, you still take your squad car in for services, you put gas in it, you change the tires, right? Check the brakes. So why don't we do the same with people?
Well, that's the thing.
Right?
Like in our typical Army saying, military saying is, you take care of your equipment takes care of you, right?
Yep.
Your mind is a very important part, equipment of the soldier, of the cop, of the firefighter, of the doctor. That's probably the most critical part of it. Of it.
The cavalry has a saying. It's called either horse saddle man or mount saddle man. But the problem is in our communities, we forget the last one, the man.
Yeah.
We do the horse, we do the saddle.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's it. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Right. Because and I think part of it is when you look at, you know, our culture today, you hear words like, you know, self-care and me days and things like that. And in our culture, we kind of
we cringe.
shiver. We cringe at that. Like, what is, you know, excuse my language, what is this soft bullshit?
Yeah.
You know, but again, we need to stop looking at it as soft bullshit and look at it as the same way that we would clean our weapon, do a functions check on our equipment, check our cuffs, inventory our go bag, change the oil in our car.
Yeah.
Right. So going to therapy, being honest with yourself, taking time after mission to just stop, breathe, and unpack those feelings. And then as leaders, providing the time and space for folks to do that. And I don't want to confuse that with the other cringy term, safe space, right? But guys need to know, hey man, like you just went through some heavy shit. You know, if you need to go talk to somebody, that's fine. If you need to go take some time to clear your head, that's fine. If you're at the bar and you realize you've had way too many to drink and you need somebody to come there and sit with you and just kind of let it out and we'll just act like it never happened the next morning, that's fine too. Whatever you need to do that PMCS on yourself and do that functions check on yourself and kind of release a little bit of that pressure and tension in yourself on a short-term basis until we can get to that next major maintenance period where you're going to see a counselor or you're going to therapy if you still need to, then that's what we need to do. And we need to let guys know that it is okay and that we're not judging you. Because how many times have we sat in formations and heard leaders say, hey, if you need help, say something. If you need help, raise your hand. It's okay to go see behavioral health. And the first guy that does it is like,
Yeah. That's right.
Told you he was the soft one. I knew it. I knew it. Hey, Sergeant Major, put him on the tracker.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
But also there's that other piece of it, which is it's prescribed, and it's prescribed by somebody who you might be like, I don't want to let you into my brain. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between me going out and finding my mental health, if I'm smart enough to do that, and being told by a sergeant major, hey, you need to go see this fucking guy over here, sit down with him. And I'm like, dude, I don't know who this fucking some bureaucrat sitting in the VA is. I don't want to talk to that dude. And that's another big piece, because unlike your weapon or PT or anything else, any other maintenance check we do, where you can kind of do a one size fits all, go, hey, if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, everything should come together. The brain's an individual thing. And I think that's what makes it so difficult, because you need that internal dedication to it. And sometimes that's hard to do if you're like, I'm surrounded by people I don't necessarily relate to or want to be open up to.
And I think that's why it's important for leaders to create the space, right? The Army says, I will go get a physical every year. So I go get a physical every year. If I don't get a physical, I end up running a tracker and someone will come and find me. And eventually, if I keep deciding not to do it, I'm going to get punished and they're going to drag me to get my physical anyway. Yeah. So if we know that behavioral health is important, if we know that mental health is important, and if we know that this is something that guys might not do on their own, like a physical, then we create the opportunity. Hey, as part of your annual physical, you will go and sit and talk with a counselor. period. And even if you just go in there and you sit sullenly for 30 minutes, okay. Or even if you go in there and just, talk about the Bucks, it's okay. But you know what? There's going to be folks who recognize that opportunity and they're going to open up and talk. And guess what? Because everybody's doing it and because it's tracked and because it's a standard, now you have leader presence with it, right? You have something enforceable. I mean, there's nothing to say that we can't use our providers and chaplains for more than just their basic functions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's hey, man, you're going to go sit down and talk with the chap. Hey, it's your birth month. Go update your emergency contact. Go update your life insurance. And hey, you're due for your annual with the chaplain.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
Right. And then that creates the space. And if the chap identifies something, hey, now we can bring the kid more resources. Right. But I think that's where we fail as leaders in the community in creating the environment and creating the opportunities for folks to open up in a way that doesn't feel like they're being singled out, in a way that's normalized.
So real quick, Chris, before I forget. So in going along this conversation that we're having just right now, and I want to just go into this whole high-risk soldier, the way the Army started categorizing their soldiers on low risk, high risk, and just reading from your book, and this is in your book, Army Soldiers Leader Risk Reduction Tool, the SLRRT, and is used by Army leaders, supervisors to assess soldiers' risk level. So checklist of questions: has the soldier engaged in risky behavior? Is the soldier having relationship problems? Is the soldier having trouble sleeping? Is the soldier having difficulty coping with loss? Has the soldier expressed excessive anger or aggression? Has a soldier expressed suicidal thoughts? So then after you do that assessment, they go to low, whether, depending on how they answer, low risk or high risk. The low risk soldier has no significant problems or has problems for which he or she is receiving appropriate support. The potential adverse outcomes appears to be low. And then high risk behaviors or concerns that potentially place the soldier or others in danger of or harm's way. Example, life-threatening risk-taking behavior, serious performance problems that jeopardize team safety, threat and self and others. Then senior leadership in the battalion commander equivalent or higher and appropriate channels should be notified immediately. Now, with this assessment, right, and knowing that soldiers have come back through war, I mean, my personal experience when we were demobbing, you got a bunch of people from the VA or whoever is there, and they tell us, hey, if you're having issues, you can come see us, let us know, raise your hand, whatever. But if and those who raise their hands and tell us that they have issues, you'll stay on base for another you're like,
yep,
wait a minute.
If I lie, I can go home.
Yeah.
If I say yes, you're going to keep me here longer.
Yeah. And the unfortunate part is not unfortunate or fortunate, however you want to say it. One of our soldiers actually, was like, hey, I have issues, I got problems. They not only did they keep him 6 months, up to it was almost a year on base after we all got to go home, and they put him with rear detachment, and he was treated like shit at rear detachment. You have a combat soldier who's not faking an injury, who's not doing this, doing that.
Yep.
And he got treated like trash. He was telling me they were having him do push lawn mowing, and it was horrible experience. So how can you, again, you do these assessments though, the big army does these assessments, but then fail their soldiers when it comes time for the actual help.
So I'll tell you is the SLRT was a good intentioned tool to a problem the Army didn't know how to solve, right? It was, hey, we have soldiers who are coming home and we're seeing increases in domestic violence and violent behavior and criminal behavior and depression and suicide. We have to do something. Okay, well, what can we do? Well, we'll ask a soldier a bunch of questions, and then depending on his answer, we'll get him help, right? It sounds great. The problem is the tool is only as good as the leader.
Yeah.
And that's where it came, is even though we had a tool, that was a good tool, a well-intentioned tool, you still didn't have the leaders who actually gave a shit. And when I say give a shit, is not just let me get the numbers on my high risk tracker down, but I don't care about Specialist Smith. No, I care about Bill Smith, right? Bill Smith from Paducah, Kentucky, who's got, a wife and 2 kids. And while I have met a lot of leaders in the military who were like that, who valued me as a human being, I've had just as many that I am a number on a tracker.
Yep.
I am a chiclet to be turned green. And I am an SIR waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, is how are you using the tool? I had leaders who used the tool and were like, you're going to go get the help, and I'm going to make you get help, and I'm going to create the space and the resources for you. Or, hey man, I just wanted to talk and check on you and how you're feeling. And then you had the folks who treated you as kind of, a giant red flashing warning, right? The other thing too is the tool requires leaders to know their soldiers. And perfect example, when I was a troop commander, we came home from Afghanistan, and I had a young kid. I think he was maybe 20, 21, but first enlistment. He great soldier, so he comes home and we're doing our post deployment health assessment, and he gets the high risk, so he gets the slurred inventory. And so he's going through and see, if you've been here for a while, the answers. Look, I sleep 6 to 8 hours a night. I never have more than 1 to 2 drinks.
Yeah.
No more than 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my dogs. I don't have nightmares. And I don't have any bad thoughts. Well, this kid answered the questions honestly. He gets it. How many drinks do you have a night? Oh, well, sometimes after work, because all junior soldiers sound like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Junior soldiers and lieutenants. Oh, well, sometimes 2 or 3. Check. Do you do any risky behaviors? Oh, well, I like to skydive. I'm probably gonna go skydiving over leave, because the kid did skydive. The kid owned a motorcycle. Are you sleeping? Oh, well, body's still on Afghan time, so yeah, a little bit of trouble sleeping. Here's another one.
Yeah.
Right. And the kid was, just like a lot of other Army kids, he came from a troubled background, didn't really have contact with his family. So now he doesn't have close family ties. And he goes through all this, and I get a call saying, Captain Wharton, what the hell are you doing with this kid? What do you mean? Specialist Jones. How do you not have him with the chaplain, with the provider? And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? The kid maxed out the slurred inventory. So I got his question. I looked at it, and I immediately knew what happened. So I pulled the kid, me and First Sergeant pulled the kid in, and we talked to him, and he was like, oh, sir, I'm just being honest. And now I'm getting all these calls that I have to go to like inpatient treatment and ASAP and all these other things. And people are looking, I'm like, call. But again, a bureaucratic tool kicked out a bunch of actions, but no one talked to the leader who knew the soldier to be like, the kid's 21 and he was just being honest. He's a good kid. He has a lot to look forward to. We know this kid. He is not a risk and not a threat. I mean, even his platoon sergeant, his squad leader were like, get out of here. Right. Yeah. But again, had we not been in place, what would have happened? The bureaucracy, the system would have snatched him up, ran him through all those things. And like you said, Ayman, like a well-intentioned process would have actually made this kid worse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's
so,
yeah. Wow.
And the slurt is still used in some form or fashion today. I've sat through slurt briefs. I've seen the inventory sheets. The Army, I will say, is doing a better job now than they did. There is a greater respect for privacy. There is a greater respect for discretion. No longer is it every company commander and first sergeant and half the staff sitting through reviewing like all the intimate details of a dude's life, right? And there are more programs now to ensure that a soldier has access for resources and their follow-ups. But guys still fall through the cracks. And what is the one common denominator between guys who fell through the cracks now and guys who fell through the cracks then? It's leaders who aren't engaged and leaders who don't care. And the same thing is true with the soldiers that you see who get help and are the success stories. Leaders who are involved, leaders who care, and leaders who are engaged and who create those spaces where guys can go and get help, where guys and gals can go and get help and get the care they need. while still feeling like they are a valued member of the team.
Yeah, that's extremely important. That's huge right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember thinking back now, I just again a flashback to Iraq. I had a specialist. I was a sergeant at the time, and I had a specialist. I remember I used to go around to all the tents, checking on all the guys. Like I didn't, hey, what's up, guys? How you doing? It doesn't have to necessarily by squad or anybody. I'm just, go out there and check on everybody. And I remember talking to this kid, and he felt suicidal. He told me right out after we were talking for a while, because I could tell his head was down, feeling however he was feeling, and talked to him for over an hour until it finally came out. Now, here's the thing. This kid, he has access to guns, ammo, grenades, like everything, the access is there because we're in combat. And I immediately went to my, to the commander and the first sergeant, and they looked at me dumbfounded, like as if, oh, well, okay, now what? Like, what the fuck? Like, do something. Like, let's fricking figure out something to do with him, because clearly he's in trouble. He just openly admitted it to me. And I don't know how long we have before he decides, you know what, I just spoke my mind and now I'm going to shoot myself or do whatever. It was like, I made sure it got rushed. Like, hey, get to him, talk to him. And unfortunately, he's the same one that bureaucratically got destroyed because of the way the Army handled it, and it was like, to me, it really showed me in the middle of theater and combat. Like, I get it. We all need to be a ready fighting force, and we've got to be ready for the mission. But if the squad is broken, the mission's going to be broken. The mission's not going to be a success, or the mission's not going to follow through, because you have one soldier who's having legitimate issues, and that soldier needs that help. And getting that help, this should be the priority of the command. And I think the bad leadership, our command did not really know the soldiers. They were just too bureaucratic and not really got to know Billy or Jimmy or hey, what full names. And it's amazing to me, because I remember there was like a master sergeant. We were out in the mess hall, in the chow hall, actually on base, and on a big base. And I remember one of the guys just, it was just fun banter, and called him by his first name or whatever. And this master sergeant, hey, oh, we're on first name basis now. What are you, boys? And I look at him. I'm like, actually, we are. Like, that's the thing. Like, when you kick indoors together all the time, you develop this bond, not just NCO to specialist to private. You develop a certain bond, where every once in a while, yeah, I'll throw my buddies first. Say, hey, Dave, what's up, dude? Like, it's okay, but to big Army, holy shit, that's no, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to exhibit any human emotion towards your fellow soldier, so that kind of shows, again, like we were talking with high risk soldier, the intention was great, but some of the leadership did not follow through, and unfortunately destroyed a lot of soldiers.
It takes me back to there's a line in the NCO creed that's always kind of resonated me, and it's you make sure I get this right, is, my two basic responsibilities will always be uppermost in my mind: accomplishment of my mission and the welfare of my soldiers.
Exactly.
Right. And it took me a long time as an officer to kind of realize what it meant by taking care of soldiers. When I was a young lieutenant, I thought that meant, oh, well, make sure soldiers have time off. Right. Yeah, that's not really it. Yeah. It wasn't until I was kind of a senior captain near the end of my company command time, I had two absolutely fantastic non-commissioned officers who really did a lot for my development. One was my first sergeant, who's now retired. Funny story, this first sergeant on Christmas Day at our comp played Wham's Last Christmas on repeat over the cop speakers for 4 hours. Now, every year at Christmas, the first time one of us hears it, we hop on the group chat and post a reminder to the top. The other one was a platoon sergeant, and I'll just refer to him as V. V was the absolute embodiment of the NCO creed. V knew his soldiers in and out, and V ensured that his soldiers were properly trained, equipped, that their families were ready, and all the potential distractions were taken care of, so that when it came time to put soldiers in harm's way, he could say that he did the absolute everything that he could to ensure these soldiers are ready. Even when I would watch V discipline soldiers, even when I would see him standing in front of me, in Article 15 proceedings to recommend a punishment, this man always kept in mind that this soldier is still a person, and they are more than their mistakes. And it is my job as an NCO to make sure that they are trained and ready to do the mission that, the company commander, the platoon leaders are going to put him in. I watched this guy go to soldiers in bars. I watched this guy go to the barracks to sit up with dudes. I mean, there were very few times when V did not give the absolute last of himself to ensure that a soldier was taken care of. And not just the soldiers that he currently had, ones that he had worked with before, or even the random Joe he saw screwing up on the side of the road, right? I mean, he is unfortunately the last of a dying breed that we're seeing. But man, whenever I think of taking care of soldiers, that's who comes to mind. I mean, there is nothing that were going on in his soldiers' lives that he didn't know about. And if he needed their help, they didn't have to ask. He was just there.
And just real quick, side note before Chris, I know you're aching but it reminds me of a young second lieutenant when we were moving to Iraq. We were in Kuwait getting ready to go over, and I remember we were doing mock engagements, mock missions type thing, just training up, and we had a late night, early morning, old dark 30 type hit of a compound, quote unquote, all that good stuff, and he was so hung up on when to have the soldiers eat. Like, he was hung up. Like, I get his intention on making sure the soldiers eat before they go. So I told him, like, hey, LT, let the NCOs worry about that. Just put the mission out. We'll take care of everything else. Don't worry about that. Like,
they will get fed, sir.
Yeah, they'll get
fed.
Like, he was so hung up. Like, that was part of the op board that he could not get by. I'm like, well, LT, that's why you put out the op board, and we'll take care of everything else. Don't worry about the minute details. Just make sure we get we have the assets in place that we need to get this mission done, and the NCOs will take care of everything else. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the times where me as most I think most NCOs would step in and say, hey, LT or Captain, let me worry about that. You just, give it, just do what you got to do on your end. We'll take care of things on our end. And sure enough, mission was smooth and it was all good to go. Because, I get it. Welfare of the soldiers, you got to make sure they eat. You got to make sure they're hydrated before you go to a mission. Like, I get all that, but let us worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Terron, what I loved about what you said about V is that it seems that there's a certain nuance that I think is missing when a lot of people talk about the welfare of the soldiers nowadays, when it seems like the pendulum's swinging back the other way, where, we're worried about maybe, the softness. Are we creating too gentle a force and all that? And the welfare is about getting people ready for the mission. It's not becoming their rabbi necessarily. Now, some of that is going to be implicit. You have to sit down, you have to get to know them. And of course you're going to become friends with people. Of course there's going to be a bonding, but I feel like that's also sometimes something that gets lost, is that we're not asking NCOs to be amateur psychiatrists, but you are there to go, hey, what do we, just like you said, I love how technically you put it, that it's just like any kind of PMCS that you would do. What does it take to get you back on the road and get you back in the fight? And I feel like sometimes that does get lost. What I love also, though, about listening to you, I just got to say this, is your officer mindset that goes right to, well, how can I innovate out of this problem? What's the institutional systemic fix to make sure this doesn't happen again? And it's so much more than just talking to somebody that is a good writer and articulates certain ideas. So I want to ask you about one thing that led me to a prescription issue that I want to ask you about. When you talked about the rest cycle, and you talked about it in your patrols, you talked about it during deployment, We've talked about it even on this episode. What do you think is, if you're king for a day, what is your fix to deployments? Are you somebody that thinks, yep, we should do a 3 months on, 1 month off indefinitely until the war's over? Is it, nope, the system we got works 12 to 18 months if your Army really hold and develop? What do you think is the fix to actually get rest on a combat deployment?
So a couple things is, if I was king for a day in deployment links, I found that, it seemed like 6 months was too short. 15 to 18 months was way too long.
Yeah.
9 months was about right. Because, the first 3 months you're there, you're really just kind of trying to figure stuff out. And honestly, if you're doing a year deployment, the last 3 months, you really just don't give a shit. Right. But you kind of peak at effectiveness probably around the 4 to 5 month mark, and you can kind of really sustain that for another 3 to 4. Let's be honest, the last 30 days of deployment, all anybody cares about is getting home with the pack out, right? So that's a wash. Regardless, right? But that 9 month length is about the sweet spot. As far as everything else, you try to build in work rest cycles, you try to build in rest time, but hey, the enemy has a vote.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I will make a distinction between kind of the combat deployments and the operational rotations. My last deployment was an operational rotation to Korea, and we trained, we worked hard, but this is an operational rotation. We are basically just forward position, right? Yeah, we might have worked a little longer hours, but hey, we still had weekends, right? Unless there was an actual mission or an exercise that went on. My unit did a big press to make sure that we still had social events for the unit, hail and farewells, that, guys got time off. I think the other part of it is, if you are downrange and you are, really on a combat deployment, is, again, just paying attention to your people and knowing when you have to pull a guy off the line, right? My platoon sergeant, when I deployed the first time, was pretty good about that. Like, because I had the patrol schedule, he manned the roster, right? Funny thing about being a 16-man tank platoon, one or two guys are usually always on leave. And, so you're usually rolling out with like 12 dudes on a good day. Right. Yeah. But my NCOs could look at a guy and say, okay, hey, he needs to stay back today. Right. He needs to get a little bit of extra rack, do a little bit of time to laundry, just a little bit of time just to be. Right. And again, you do all that in the confines of the operational environment and the mission requirements that you have. And what does that boil down to? Knowing your soldiers, knowing when somebody's at their limit, and knowing when to try to create space for them. But my solution, if I could wave a wand, 9 month deployments, and once a quarter, you're going to go talk to somebody, whether it's the chap, whether it's the provider, whether it's a mental health professional, if we can. But when you're actually in the shit, we're going to create space for you to go talk to somebody about what you're seeing, right? Because if the things that we did downrange, the actual killing people and breaking things and the management of violence, if all of that was so natural, then infantry OSET wouldn't last almost a year, right? Yeah, right. You could literally just take somebody off the street, put them in uniform, put a weapon in their hand, and send them out. Yeah. It's despite what all of the TV shows and the war stories and everything else says, doing physical violence to another human being is not natural, and it is not comfortable unless there is something fundamentally wrong with you. And we've all met dudes like that, and, everybody recognizes that that dude is not okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But how many times have you known 19-year-old kid goes out, gets into his first tick, kills somebody? What's the next thing that happens? Kid pukes all over himself. Yeah. Right. Yeah. People can't sleep, it's weird. And we kind of forget that because you can quickly go numb to it. Right. But we forget that the things we do aren't necessarily fundamentally natural. Right. And that's the reason why we train, we practice, we rehearse. But again, we have to understand that that there's an impact on that. You know,
and that's the Dave Grossman thing, right? That's that Dave Grossman thing about on killing. Like, hey, interspecies, it doesn't matter whether it's people or whales. There is that natural resistance to killing your own kind, unless you are a sociopath. But we don't stress that much about killing other species, but we do stress about killing one of our own. And that's what, and you're right, that's what it takes is that repeated effort to try to get over the hump so that you can pull the trigger when you need to and actually hit what you're supposed to, and not just, I think you phrased it, become a conscientious objector at the pull of the trigger, where you're just trying to make noise because you don't want to let your buddies down, but you're not really caring about what you're aiming at.
Yeah.
I mean Grossman mentions that in his book, right? When he talks about, you know, the engagement rates in World War I, was something only like a third of soldiers actually fired their weapons at the enemy intentionally, right? And what did the Army do? Like, we changed it from round targets to human-shaped silhouettes, right? And when you go to the range, you're not shooting targets, you're shooting Ivans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You think about all the cadences you sing when you're training that sure as hell can't repeat here, right? But all of those go into part of the conditioning to break down that natural aversion and make it easier, right? But that still has a cost. I mean, I have one of my old first sergeants, man, I love and respect, once told me, he's like, hey, I truly believe that I will have to answer for every life I took, justified or not. Right. And I know a lot of soldiers who feel that way, that it does something to you. And the aversion we have to talking about it, the barriers we have to talking about it, the walls that we kind of put up so we can just kind of function with that, but we don't create the space and the ways to kind of talk those feelings out and work those feelings out. All of those compound, into those moral injuries that Grossman talks about.
Well, and that's funny because that was actually Grossman's forward. I think he said, go to the library, go to a bookstore, look how many books you can find on having sex, or how many books you can find on how to cope with divorce, or how many books to find with coping with grief. But how many books are there to tell you how to deal with killing? And the after effects of that, and that it is its own study, and it is an in-depth study. Sorry, Ayman, I cut you off.
No worries. I was just going to say one thing. I met Dave Grossman in a seminar he puts on, for law enforcement, military, everywhere. So he just happened to come to my neck of the woods, and it was an amazing conversation I had with him. And one thing is, when I came home in 2006, not knowing about Dave Grossman's book, many years later, I actually read it, and I was like, my God, if I only had this, when I first came home, I would understand exactly what's going on with me, my soldiers, what goes on in the human mind, because the Army never taught you any of that. The Army never really went into the whys, and like you said, the conditioning, the battle drills, the cadences, everything goes into being that war fighter. And as much as sometimes civilians are like, oh my God, the military war and all that. Yeah, but you know what? We have a function. There's a reason why we train a certain way to be able to get over that hump and be able to execute these missions with the extremes that we go into to get the job done. But again, it goes back to everything that we've been talking about, is mentally being able to have that rest time after, and being able to process everything. And I think I've told this story before. I've told you, Chris, before about, that SWAT hit where I nearly, contact shot, killed a guy. And 2 days later, I had a legitimate panic attack. And I was like, it was because I forgot to work on those things because when you go through therapy, you learn, all right, this is what happens to me right before a panic attack, 2 days before a panic attack. All right, then you work on it, you do it, and then you get over that hump, good to go. Versus, I was doing SWAT mission after SWAT mission after SWAT mission. It was a very, very busy time. And I did not allow myself, I put up those walls, not allowing really to the moment of reflection of being like, all right, doing the AAR, doing the internal AAR in your head and being like, all right, how do I feel? Let's see. All right, how do I feel today? What is this? What is that? Where 2 days later, I had a full-blown panic attack driving on my way to training. And I was like, holy shit. And it goes to show how important it is to have to be able to recognize those quote unquote triggers as you go out through your day, because if you're unable to recognize them, that's when soldiers get in trouble. That's when cops get in trouble.
Yep.
That's when, a lot of these high stress jobs, that's why we get in trouble, because we ignore those signs that we need to take the time to rest. And our leaders, it's incumbent on leadership to recognize also before a cop is in a bad way, or a soldier's in a bad way, or whatever. It's incumbent on leadership to also step in. So
yeah, I mean, every time you pull the trigger on your weapon, there is a chance, not probable, but there is a chance that the weapon will just blow up in your face. Every time you pull the trigger. And manufacturers run those failure tests so they can say, hey, this will occur at 5 million rounds fired, or 10 million rounds fired, or 15 million rounds fired, right? But when you have a perfectly brand new functioning weapon, up to date on its maintenance, I mean, the probability is so infinitesimally low that it might not even exist. But if you just fire that weapon every single day, day in, day out, and you don't do any maintenance on it, now it's ticking up, and it's getting higher, and it's getting higher. Now, instead of a 1 out of 10 million chance, it's a 1 out of a million. Instead of 1 out of a million, it's 1 out of 500,000. Now it's 1 out of 50,000, right? And okay, 1 out of 50,000 really ain't that great. But, hey, now we're at 1 at 10,000.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do something 10,000 repetitions for that one to blow up in your face, right? And again, what we're seeing is, and then when it happens, it's, my God.
Yeah.
We had no idea.
Why did this happen?
Why did this happen? Why did we get to the point? Right?
Yeah.
It's funny because, in the Army, whenever there is a safety accident, you do an Army ground accident report, right? So any kind of vehicular accident. One of the first things that's pulled in the Army ground accident report and is included in the investigation are the maintenance files. As soon as there is a vehicle accident, like for example, we had a few vehicle fires in my last unit. One of the first things the investigator says, go find the maintenance tech, and I want the service packet for the vehicle. When was the pack pulled? When was the last flush done? When was the oil change? When was the last service packet installed, right? Because the Army realizes when something bad happens to a vehicle, there's usually a direct correlation to somebody not doing the maintenance they're supposed to. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's funny that we recognize that in your equipment, right? Ayman, I'm sure if you guys had a weapon misfire on the range, first thing you're probably going to do is you're going to inspect the weapon yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Then you're going to go see the armorer.
Yeah.
Hey, bro, who did maintenance on this weapon last?
Yeah.
You're going to ask your guy, when's the last time you cleaned it? When's the last time you disassembled it?
Yeah.
Right? You're probably going to pull it apart yourself and inspect it and take a look at it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I bet that you will have the ass if you open that weapon up and you see things that were obviously damaged or corroded.
Oh, trust me, I lose my mind every time one of the officers has a dirty weapon that hasn't cleaned in a year, and I'm like, "Are you fucking serious?"
Yeah, because there's a direct correlation between the care you put in your weapon and its performance on the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with people. There's a direct correlation between the maintenance we conduct on ourselves, and our ultimate performance when it counts. Because if we don't do it, that 1 in 10,000 isn't going to hit when we're sitting on the couch in a low risk environment, right? If something bad can happen, it will happen, and it will always happen at the worst possible time.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. So again, we need to take the same care of ourselves that we do with our equipment. We need to invest the same time in our vehicles as we do on our own mental health, right? We need to do the same repetitions of managing our stress, of recognizing the signs that we're about to pop, as we do running iterations on the range, right? You can't just do it once, right? And how many rounds do you think that you fire in a year in training as a SWAT officer?
I'd say we're average 5,000 rounds, probably.
5,000 rounds, right? 5,000 rounds a year. Would you say that's to get better or to maintain where you are?
Oh, that's always to get better, always to excel.
Right? So 5,000 rounds to get you a little bit better than you were before.
Yeah.
Right? So, but you're sure as shit not going out to the range popping off one around and being like, all right, guys,
Yeah,
training's complete for the
it
year.
never
let's
works
go.
that way. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
But we do that with our mental health.
Yeah, sure.
I talked to the chaplain once. I'm good. I went to a therapist once. I'm good. I called the Veterans Crisis Line once. I'm good. I talked to my buddy late one night. I'm good. Doesn't work like that.
No.
You know, like Chris, you mentioned earlier, what's the line between repression and discipline? You know, discipline comes when you are committed to doing the work. That's where the discipline aspect is.
Yeah.
We have to be disciplined in, we're going to be honest with ourselves. We're going to do an honest self-assessment, just like we would assess our unit for its training proficiency. We're going to assess ourselves on our mental health, just like we'd be disciplined in following the training plans for enter and clear a room. We need to be disciplined in the approach we need to take for our mental health. The discipline is it's no different. It's just applied in a different aspect of our lives. If we're disciplined with our equipment, if we're disciplined with our training, we need to be disciplined with our own mental health.
Yeah.
Terron, I want to read part of your book back to you, and then I got a question for you about it. It was one that was written so simply that I couldn't believe nobody had ever articulated as well as you did. So the quote is, "You never really know how much a situation has affected you until you're no longer neck deep in it, until you're no longer looking over your shoulder, until your mind finally registers, hey, relax, no one's trying to kill you. You get a massive outpouring of tension, followed by relief, and then followed by guilt. Finally, the strangest thing of all, you start to miss it. You find you feel more awkward back in this alternate reality than in your quote unquote normal world. And you wonder what that means. You find things start to itch just under the surface. You miss the rumble of gunpowder and cordite and the throb of the pack. You find it all seems a little out of place back here." What kept you so fixated in life and death professions personally?
I guess this is always what I felt, what I was meant to do. And I can't remember. I heard this very, very early on, but it was someone was describing a soldier. And what they said was, you know, a soldier is someone who protects those who can't protect themselves. My dad's retired law enforcement, did 33 years, vice, narcotics, gangs, undercover, was finished his career out as a detective for juvenile crimes. And that's what it always was to me about being a soldier. It was being part of something bigger than myself. And, you know, there are bad people and bad things in this world, and someone has to do something about it. Right. And if I have the ability to do that, and I have a calling to do that, then that's what I need to do. And it's, you know, I've never quite been able to really put a finger on it with my civilian friends about how you can both completely hate combat and miss it at the same time. I think the closest I can get to is boxing, right? Boxing is not a team sport. It is you and one other dude, and no one is coming to help you. Yep. And you're going to win or you're going to lose, right? And I think there's a little bit of that simplicity in combat. At the end of the day, there's an indescribable feeling of knowing that you were in the ultimate test. Yep. And you won. It's weird.
That's
right?
What I always say. It's like when you're battle tested. It's like you're battle tested. You know, you pass that. It's almost like a rite of passage, I guess I'll call it, especially for combat soldiers. Sorry to cut you off, Terron.
That's exactly what it is. I made it through this and I won and I could do it. And the weird paradoxical mix of emotions, you know, the rush, the excitement, the adrenaline, the realization of, did I really just feel that? How did I enjoy this? What's wrong with me? The sense of shared accomplishment with your soldiers around you, all those kind of things. It's confusing. It's exciting. It's intoxicating. It doesn't really translate well if you haven't done it. Some people look at it as being an adrenaline junkie. Well, it's not that.
It's not that at all.
I have a car that I drive way too fast for an adrenaline rush a few times, right? I've done other kind of cool, exciting things. Jumped out of an airplane. That was an adrenaline rush. None of the adrenaline rushes I've had in the civilian world came close to the sensation and the feelings, after, we cornered, engaged, and destroyed an RPG team, right? Or, when an EFP, gutted my very first tank in combat, and I walked away with nothing more than a rung bell and a jammed shoulder, right? I mean, it's indescribable. The things you see, the things you experience, those feelings. And, I don't know if it's, and I guess this is the hard thing is, do I think that I miss combat itself? Hell no. Absolutely not. If no one ever shoots at me again for the rest of my natural life, I will die a happy man. But I think the thing you miss is that sensation and that feeling of, overcoming that ultimate test, really kind of overcoming that obstacle. And I think that's even now, like it's hard to put into words and hard to describe.
So to use your boxing analogy, for you personally, when's the 12th round over? When does the match end? When does that mental trait shut off?
That's a good question. I don't know if it ever does. I think that's one of the things that we struggle with. I don't think that it's an either or, right? I think it just becomes a part of you, just like your eye color, your hair color, your food preference. And I think that's when you can really that's when I noticed that I healed, right? It took me about 5 years to really kind of get past my trauma. And it was while writing this book where I realized, hey, this is just a part of me now, right? It isn't good. It isn't bad. It just is. Yep. And then further is, because it is a part of me, I can choose what to do with it. Mm-hmm. Right? I can choose to use this experience to try to help other people, and that's what I chose to do. Yeah. And I think that's I don't know if there's as much of an end as there is a reconciliation.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I don't see it as an end on my part also. I see it. I've always said that going to war woke something up in me. Something woke up. Whether you want to call it a wolf, demon, freaking lion, whatever, something woke up in me after I got home, and I realized that at home, because you don't really realize it at combat, because at combat everything's intense, aggressive, all that stuff. I realized it after, when I came home, and that's the thing where I'll always say a part of me will always be at that war, and I've learned to accept it.
But also, I mean, you got combat blue balls, for lack of a better word, right? Because the military forced you to lose your heart on with that, and which sucks also. So you got cut off.
I mean, the military did kick. They're like, yeah, you're all done. We're all set with you. But the thing is, the reason why I transitioned to law enforcement, as most of fellow combat vets that did that, is because of that not rush for combat or anything like that, but it's that keeping that thing in us that developed in us, keep it going, keep it alive, because that's where we felt the most alive we've ever felt, when we're dealing with these situations and these traumas and all that stuff, is putting us, because we know what we're capable of. We're battle tested. We know how we will react, to different scenarios, different situations. We can keep a level head. And
it's funny you mentioned that, because the last job I had, we were doing a command post exercise, and we were sitting out in the talk, and here I am, a major in the unit, and I'm sitting there and I'm responding to an email on my BlackBerry, and I just give the heavy sigh, right? And the battle captain's the lieutenant goes, "Sir, what's wrong?" And I said, "Man, I used to chase dudes through the street of Baghdad at night, body armor, hopping over fences, fighting dudes, arresting folks, getting into car chases. And now my most casually producing weapon system is my cell phone. And he just kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And then one of the old NCOs behind him was like, yeah, about that, my soul, sir. But yeah, I remember one of my favorite memories, was a tank platoon leader. We literally got into a car chase between a tanker truck, one of those giant fuel tanker trucks, and I was in a tank. And here I am, bombing up Route Pluto's, doing 35 miles an hour and 72 tons of all-American murder, and literally slaloming through traffic in a tank, right? One hand on the 50 cal, one hand keying the mic. And I'm just sitting here like, I will never be as badass in my life as I am. Fast forward 13 years, and here I am answering emails about why the ammo drop was late, right? And you can just literally just feel your soul die a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, we got to do some cool things. We got to do some unique things. We got to do some once in a lifetime things. And it was, at the same time, feeling like you were part of something bigger than yourself. The guys, as corny as it sounds, is the guys to the left and right of you, right? Yeah. Those shared experiences that just bond you. And like you said, Ayman, it's like guys get out, and it's what is it that we really, really miss? What draws guys back to things like law enforcement and other service jobs? I think a lot of it is, I want to be part of something bigger than myself, And when I retire, I told my wife, I was like, when I retire, I don't think I'm going to go, get some corporate job and be rich. I will probably be a lowly paid government employee my entire life, because the thought of waking up and going to work just to make some rich dude even richer, that it doesn't, why?
Yeah.
What's the greater good in that? But
see, that's me. Like, I'm getting close to that time in my career as law enforcement. And I did a really introspective, I'm like, all right, what do I really want to do when I'm done? And the realization is, I want to take the knowledge that I've gathered for all these decades and give it to the younger cop, give it to the younger soldier, give it to whomever, where I'm going to be more on the training side of things. I'm not going to be the one kicking in the door, but you know what? I want to keep myself within that community and teach guys and gals these things, teach firearms, teach entries, teach CQB, where I can, having that knowledge in the back of my brain. If I was to retire, like you said, go to a corporate job, well, I have all this knowledge in my head. It's not gonna benefit anybody.
Yeah.
Versus
you get it
benefit.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Unless I get, and that's what I see a lot in the retired military, retired SF, retired SWAT, retired. All of them, though, the way they found their need to stay within the community is training. Is because now they still feel they are a part of something more than themselves, versus doing it for somebody else.
Terron, do you feel like there's still boxes that you have to tick for yourself personally? There's still something you need to prove. There's still some sense of, I got to scratch that itch still.
Honestly, I would say the last box that I feel like I really need to tick is being a good husband and a good father.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. I've done a lot of cool things in my life. I've had a lot of professional successes. And some of that has come at a cost and come at a strain on the family. So the most important mission I have now is to be a good husband and a good father, right? Everything else I'm kind of doing from here on out kind of goes back to how will it impact that mission and that role.
How much do you wish you could have changed? I know granularly, of course, there's, it would have been great to have, done a lot more in a tactical sense, but generally when you look over how your life has unfolded and the battles you fought, administratively, psychologically, all those things, would you change any of it? Or do you think like, hey, this has been a worthwhile mission, a worthwhile purpose that's gotten you to this point?
So I've always truly believed that we're the sum of our experiences. And if you change one thing, you change who you are. And, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from folks on the book. I've had people reach out and say that, hey, this has really helped me. And, who knows? Maybe there's a soldier somewhere who saw the book, read the book, heard a post, heard somebody talking about it, and that convinced them to go get help, right? Or that pulled them out of crisis, right? And, if this book has helped one person and has, helped pull one person, out of crisis and out of darkness, and yeah, it's been worth it. Your struggles, your struggles and pain are only worthless if you don't apply the lessons and do something about it.
Yeah. Are you still writing? You still write every day?
Yeah. I don't write every day. I've actually had quite a few publications out. This is my only book, but I've written several articles in a lot of the military blogs on organizational leadership and things like that. Probably one of my biggest successes was an article called How to Fail as a Major, where I kind of relayed the 4 ways that you can really screw up transitioning to become a field grade officer. And I shared those because I personally screwed every single one of those up. And it was only by, the grace of God and some patient bosses and some good mentors that I was able to succeed. So again, our professors are one of those like, hey, learn from other people's lessons. So again, that's kind of my passion now is I want to give back to the profession. And the way that I found to give back to our profession is writing and sharing my experiences and sharing my mistakes so that others can read and grow about it. So ultimately, I think if I do ever write a second book, it's probably going to be on organizational leadership.
Interesting. That makes sense because it seems like, I mean, in many respects, this book is a sort of, I don't want to say poetic journey, but there's so much personally that's invested in it, but you can't help but start to prescribe and figure out, hey, how do you fix this? How do you make sure some of these things change for the future? I just want to ask, as I know we're getting close to wrapping things up, with everything going on in the world today, at one point in your book, you say, I can't believe I got on the plane to go back to Afghanistan. Would you, I mean, obviously you'd go where you're ordered. If they told you to get back on a plane now, what would your emotions be if that call came again, being with everything you've been through at this point?
So if, the Russians cross the berm and we're going into a high intensity conflict of tank battles and artillery and losing entire battalions in a day, you had to get on the plane and I'd be absolutely terrified. I think anybody who says they wouldn't be afraid is absolutely lying. You can definitely see the change. And when I was a lieutenant, when it was just me, I was just kind of dating somebody. Then I was just single, going to combat deploying. Yeah, sure, man. If I get hit by a rocket, I guess my parents are getting, $500,000.
Right.
When I was in Afghanistan, I remember that very last, when my squadron commander came down and said, hey, I know we're about to go home, but there's this sector where no Americans have been for 6 months, and we're going to send you guys up there to kind of kick around, see what happens, and put in an AUP checkpoint. The first thing in my head was, I'm going to fucking die. This is it. This is when people die in deployments. Because I remember when I first got to Iraq, I'm like, hey, why is old boy just sitting around the fob? Oh, he goes on leave in like 3 weeks. So why'd they stop patrolling him now? Don't want him to get killed before he goes home. Like, you always die right before. It sounds so cliche.
It is so true though. It's so true.
It's so
cliche
true.
for a reason.
I had a couple of classmates and good friends who were killed in similar fashions, and all I could think of was like that whole mission, like rolling out, is like, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna marry this woman, and I'm gonna die, or worse than that, I'll be horribly injured.
Yeah.
Like, will she stay? Will she leave me? What's my life gonna be like? And I would walk on that plane and I'd wonder the whole time, am I gonna widow my wife? Are my kids gonna have a father? Right? Am I gonna come back with PTSD like I did the last time? Am I gonna be able to have the strength to get over it again? All those thoughts and fears will be going through my head. But at the end of the day, and I learned this from the first NCO example I ever had in my life. He was my JROTC instructor in high school, retired sergeant first class out of 5th group. Remember him telling me, like, courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. Right. And that's what it comes down to, because there's things that override your fear. There's your sense of duty, your sense of honor, your sense of commitment to the mission and to your unit. Right. There's a lot of things that we use to help overcome that fear. But to sit here and pretend like I wouldn't be afraid, get the fuck out of here.
Oh no, for sure.
I am not 22. I am not 22, and I have things to lose now.
Yeah.
I have responsibilities outside the service.
Yeah.
Right. My dad said there was a very similar thought that he had when he, transitioned from being on the street to, going over to crime prevention and a school resource officer. I mean, you probably heard, like, had fellow cops, oh man, you're not a real cop if you're not on the street, if you're not out there on patrol.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I got responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is better. This is better for my family. And I am still serving my community. I'm just doing it in a different way.
Yeah.
So again, I'd be terrified. And I think that that's absolutely normal, absolutely natural. And it's not, being terrified isn't the important thing. It's being terrified and doing it anyway.
What do you do with the terror? That's right. Exactly.
Well, that's the thing is whether it was my time in the Army in Iraq, or now with SWAT and all the hundreds of missions that I've done, operations that I've done, the feeling never goes away of, it's amazing to me. Like, we'll be in the Bearcat 10 minutes out. We'll be laughing, joking, smoke, whatever, and sure as shit, we hear 5 minutes. Everyone starts getting quiet. 1 minute out, game pace on, right? Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing is, we're all scared, but you know what? It's our guy to our left and right that we won't fail. That's the courage part. When those doors open, we're going out there to we got a mission to do, but at the same time, we want to make sure every one of us goes home at the end of the mission. Yep.
And it is there's a time when you got to put those feelings and put those fears in a box.
Yep.
And you put them in a box, you do the work, take them out the box, do the work, do the work again, reconcile those feelings.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it, right? That's the discipline versus repression, right? That's disciplining yourself right at the point of impact.
Well, that's my civilian friends. They would always ask me, when I was in Iraq, they're like, man, weren't you ever scared of, like, hitting IEDs all the time, or ambush, blah, 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 blah. I was like, yeah, of course. But if I had a mission and I had to be out there, those aren't going to be the things on the forefront of my mind. That's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking
that's
about
where the training kicks in.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I tell them, I said, the training kicks in. The only thing I'm thinking about is my gun truck, my gunner, my driver, and whoever else is in my immediate gun truck, my squad that we're going out there. I'm not even thinking about the IEDs. Yeah. And then back of my mind, but they're not stopping me from doing the mission. Same thing out on the streets as a cop. Yeah, is there a potential I'm going to get stabbed, shot, whatever? Oh, yeah, but it's not going to stop me. I still have to serve. I still have that sense of duty and honor that I have to be out there to protect and to do my job. But yeah, it's in the back of my mind, but my mission's first. I think that's one of those things, where I always place the mission first, where I've also kind of adopted it in a way where, the mission's always going to be my mission, or the mission's going to be for myself, as in my mental health, right? You always place the mission first. And then same thing with my guys. Yeah, the mission is also my guys, to make sure they come home safe and have the equipment and necessary training needed to execute the job well done. So,
hey, Ayman, were you going to read something?
Oh yeah. So one thing I wanted.
Forget.
Yeah. No, thank you. One thing actually one thing that really hooked me into the book is the poem that was it you and your guys? I know you said added by guys in my unit, written during my time in Baghdad. Was it a collective poem that all of you wrote?
I think so. The original poem is, Fiddler's Green. I think that last honestly, I think it just kind of rose organically as guys just kind of talking and bullshit and everything. Just during the deployment. The last final verse about Afghanistan I wrote while I was deployed there. But the one about Rustamaya, that just kind of
so like you write about you start off Fiddler's Green, what I want to read is the last line where you guys contribute, or where you contribute. And it says, and so when you're on the road and catch an ID or walking around on patrol and a sniper stops you clean, when Haji starts to overrun, just empty your canteen and put your pistol to your head and go Fiddler's Green. And that was added by the guys. And I think it really captured me, because not only did I read, the Fiddler's Green and just that little part, because it reminds me of my guys putting together a poem we called the Praetorian Monologue, Our Time in Iraq, which it was just a compilation of stuff we did written in a poem. And it just kind of took me back there, where I was thinking, I'm like, man, yeah, that's what we do, in terms of writing, where we look at it as soldiers and those who have been time at war. I mean, I got it right away, and was that towards the end of your deployment or towards the middle? Like when was this kind of added?
I couldn't really tell you. Well, so when we got there in October of 2006, things were kind of a little, I don't want to say steady. Things were similar, but they hadn't exploded. You guys know 2007 was a very, very bad year for Iraq, and a very bad year in Baghdad. And it was a combination, I think, of once the Iraqi Civil War really kind of kicked off and escalated rapidly and violently, corresponding with the extension. I'll never forget we had just got back in patrol. We were eating in the DFAC, and it was on TV. The news anchor was like, just in, all active duty Army units will now serve 15 months in Iraq. Because up until that point, like the extension boogeyman was kind of out there. Like some folks that got extended, but it was like, will we, won't we, But at that moment, I remember that got announced, and two things happened. The Chow Hall went dead silent, which I'd never heard before or since in my life. And I remember it was one of my soldiers looked up and goes, do you think they mean us too? And so we all we look like, seriously, dude. But here's the screwed up thing was, for 3 months, that was a legit question. Because there were questions about whether First Cav was going to get included in that, or whether or not it would be the next units going down. So I remember we were at 6 months left of deployment for 3 months. And because I had I took my leave at my 3-month mark, which corresponded with my then girlfriend's 6-month mark, I came back and I did a year. I did all of 2007.
Yeah.
Like straight up.
Yeah.
And, I think you go back to, hey, what's the ideal length? Well, 12 months straight in an area where literally you can die or be seriously wounded just lying in your bed on the fob.
That's what I did. My first 3 months, I was one of the first ones to take leave. So I spent the rest of my deployment in country. Yeah.
I mean, there was not a day on fob rest of my in 2007 where somebody from the fob wasn't coming in pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember at one point, it used to be that if there's a casualty on the fob, they'd black out. They do a combo blackout for the whole fob. So Ops Sergeant Major would go to the MWR trailer, pull the plug out the internet, lock up the phone trailer. And once notifications were done, okay, we'll open it back up to everything. It got so bad on Rusty that I think there was a rolling combo blackout for almost like 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
Because people from different units, it just one after another after another. And it got so bad that the sergeant majors kind of got together and was like, okay, look, we can't keep shutting down the whole fob. Because at that point, there was like, I think 3 or 4 battalions on Rusty. And it got to the point where it's like, okay, we'll just block out the battalion. Okay, now we're just gonna have to black out individual companies. Like the level of death and violence that fob saw and experienced was absolutely unreal. And I think that was it was rough. So I think that was kind of added in response, because remember, it wasn't like we were experiencing that level of violence and getting to hit back equally. Right. Yeah. It was a lot of you're getting ambushed, you're getting blown up. Our company had a lot of great tactical successes, but it always still kind of felt like we were taking it more than we were giving it. A lot of time. And I think that was kind of in response. And in response to those frustrations. I mean, God, we had one guy in our company, I think he was in 14 IED strikes, came out with all of his limbs and everything intact, but he suffered from, some pretty severe TBI.
Yeah.
And I mean, and again, like that level of constant exposure to violence, those constant feelings of helplessness, the constant tension of waiting for it to happen, when you don't even have to be outside the wire for it to happen, when you're getting hit by like 30 something rockets at a time,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's where a lot of that verse came from. Just kind of, it just naturally evolved from those.
I just loved it. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Chris, because I did want to ask specifically on that verse, because it really hit home and kind of hooked me right into the book right away.
Well, also, I mean the changes in the ROE and how that affected and capturing the rage that develops from that. I think a lot of people forget that, and a lot of people need to hear about that again, because that wasn't true in every theater, but especially then, and especially in Iraq, that was such a big issue.
Yeah, and in Baghdad, I mean, I tell people, like, when I started the deployment, it was like, we want to go in that house, kick the door open, go in, toss and search everything, and leave.
That was 05. That was we just did what we needed to do.
And then by the time you're leaving in 07, it's
oh my God,
Americans. Can we come in and search for AKs and IEDs? We have the Iraqi police here with us who already called and warned you to move the cash.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the frustrations that we have. And when you look at it now, when you look at it in hindsight, and when you study history and you look at counterinsurgency doctrine and things like that, you can't kill your way out of an insurgency.
Yeah.
Well, correction. You can kill your way out of an insurgency, but the moral cost of doing that is so insanely high that it doesn't necessarily work in the long term, right? The French tried it in Algeria.
Yeah.
Didn't really work. When you look at quote unquote successful American counterinsurgency operations, people go back to, well, look what we did in the Philippine War. But yeah, a lot of the things and methods that we use in the Philippine insurrection are kind of considered war crimes today, right? So not a good example of history to draw from. So
and there's a price to pay for being the good guy. Like, you have to have left and right limits that if you are an insurgency, you don't have to abide by. And if you're going to try to have a moral high ground, that's a tough hand to play. I wanted to actually, I'm sorry, I'm Terron, you've been great with your time. I don't want to take advantage of it too much more.
You're okay.
But I did want to read your section on insurgency, because I thought you captured this. I say, like, what there's so many aspects of your book that I like, but one of them is the fact that you veer between 30,000 foot view geopolitical statements into intimate personal feelings, and it goes back and forth, and you touch on so many different things that I think are fascinating. But I want to read what you wrote about insurgency. You said, insurgency, while political, acts like an infection, like a virus. It infects, and multiplies until it chokes off the rest of the healthy system. The violence is the symptom. However, few insurgencies remain true to their political roots, because power has a way of corrupting human beings. And you go on from there to explain exactly why insurgency itself as a TTP is so tricky, and I think that captures the difficulties of coin better than any paragraph I'd ever read. It was really incredible piece of writing.
Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to mention, because I don't think this gets enough attention. So there's a young woman referenced throughout the book, the girl I was saying at the time, Sarah, and this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. I don't know how many movies, TV shows, and country songs are written about the guy who comes home from deployment and he has problems, and his woman just ups and leaves him because he doesn't have the strength to handle it.
Right.
I would like to say here and now, unequivocally, that those songs and those sentiments, a lot of them are full of shit. And I'll say this way: are there a lot of times that I saw absolutely heartbreaking things where guys came home and, guys and women came home and their spouses were cheating and running around with Jody and things like that? Yeah. but it's a different thing to have a person you love and a cornerstone of your life come back as a completely different human being and not recognize, and they don't recognize their problems, and they are not getting help. And you have to literally watch them deteriorate every single day. Yeah. And we don't do enough to acknowledge the level of trauma and emotional suffering and emotional hardship that our spouses and partners and significant others go through while we are also struggling with our PTSD, right? Well, we're also struggling with our issues. And I was angry at her for a long, long time of my life. And then I finally realized, you know what? I would have left me too.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I was a man sinking, I was a man drowning, and most importantly of that, I was a man who did not think that he needed help and didn't want to get it.
Yeah.
So then how long then do you stay and expose yourself to that trauma and become traumatized yourself, right? Yeah. And so I think it's important that there's a lot of wonderful spouses who have stuck out and wonderful spouses who have stayed. And there's a lot of equally wonderful spouses who made the decision that, hey, I can't continue to suffer this trauma. And then when you add kids into the mix, it's even harder.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's not as clean as a country song.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as black and white. It's not as simple. And I think that we would do a disservice if we didn't acknowledge that, hey, when we are struggling with PTSD and depression and suicide, there are people in our lives who love us and care about us, who are struggling as we struggle.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. As I say, like, I think your book is a 360-degree treatment of so many issues, or that's rather the case. It's 360 degrees of issues that you touch on in the book. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked, that people will focus on the political, but they miss the personal, or they'll focus on the memoir, but they don't look at the prescriptive changes, systemic changes that could happen. You seem to hit on all of it and eloquently. And the fact that you're telling me 95% of that was written verbatim overseas, I'm incredibly jealous of your ability to compartmentalize and actually do that in that mindset, in a mind frame, and at that point in time. But man, it was a pleasure to read. And I'll talk to you offline, because I'd like to actually feature some of your writing in another forum, if you're okay with it. But it's a great piece of work, man. It's a great piece of work.
Yeah, and also on ours, like, just appreciate the time that you took out of your day to talk about this, because these are, I mean, some real issues that need to be discussed and always be at the forefront of soldiers, of law enforcement, of all these types of high risk businesses that get into.
Oh, thank you, and don't just thank me. Thank my my 4-year-old, my 7-year-old. Looks like they succeeded in their task, and I'm gonna have to shell out with Mission Taco for lunch tomorrow. So I think we're watching the Winter Olympic opening ceremonies tonight, and we are painting unicorns. So going back to my main role now is my most important mission now is being a good husband and a good dad. So Daddy's going to go paint some unicorns.
All right, betcha. We'll let you get back to your mission, then. Let you get back to the mission. That's right. Terron, thanks, man. And when you are out of uniform, not like you held back or didn't speak freely now, but when you're out of uniform and moved on to whatever your second career is, I'd certainly love to talk to you again. And if there's anything you did have to hold back on, I'd love to hear what else you got cooking.
Oh, definitely.
All right, my
appreciate it, man.
Appreciate Darren, and great talking to you guys.
Hey, thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, take care.
Dude, awesome conversation, man.
Yeah, right.
Fantastic show from the Havok guys.
Yeah, in Havok fashion, another great episode.
Profiles in Havok. Guys, we want to say thank you to our supporters. ProjectSapient.org. Check us out. Shoot us an email, projectsapient2020@gmail.com. We want to say thanks to DCD Automotive, which is the Boch group. The Till Valhalla project. Ayman is working on some amazing shit with them. AAA Police Supply, Havok Journal. Second Mission, Live Boston, OD Kit, Eagle Eye Firearms, GunTrack.app, Fit Cops, 22 Mohawks, and Joint Operation. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We love you. Stay safe.
Stay sapient.